Why do you have my entities on the table again? There's a Trinity... Your episode's more expensive than my entity episode.
I'm good at the expensive.
Are you good at the expensive of shit that's mine? You played 2 of my entities at Nationals. You're about to use my team base in an episode. Fucking go ahead.
We're married. What do you expect?
And then ask her to share her con Wolverine, guys.
Nope. Welcome to being married to a Clix player. Alright, hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Dial It Up. Today, as you can probably tell, we are going to go over how to use the entities. Now, the entities are here. We've seen them pop up all over the place with nationals, with ROCs, local tournaments, pulling them World of Light itself, and there's still a lot of questions floating around as to how exactly to play these characters. So I'm going to go over the very basics and then get into the tricky stuff and hopefully answer all of your guys' questions that you don't even know that you had. So first off, the entities can be played at 2 different point values. They can be played at their major point value, which is usually really high. For today, I've got Parallax, Adara, Ophidian, and I actually have Black Hand. So I think out of these guys, the lowest is Adara, and even then, it's 170 points. So we're looking at high points to play them as just a regular character on the board. The other point value is to use them as a possessor. Now, every entity and Black Hand has the entity possession trait. So basically, I'm not going to read exactly what it says. We'll get into the wording a little bit later. But what you do is you pay 25 points at the beginning of your build and choose whichever entity to possess a character. Now, when you possess that character, at the beginning of each of your turns, you may pick a stat and a power. When you pick a stat, you compare stats. So you take a dial of the character that you're possessing, you take your possessor, possessed, possessor, and you compare their stat values. So if there is a stat that is higher on the possessor than it is on the possessed, you can choose that stat, and that stat gets +1. It's not a replacement. You don't get the stat that's on the possessor's dial. You just get +1 to your stat. It's kind of like a little Perplex, but with a lot of complication to it. So, like in this case, Parallax's attack is higher than Chameleon Girl's attack. So we're going to give her +1 to her attack. Simple as that. The next part of it is that you get to pick a power. Any power that is showing on the possessor's dial, you just pick it and you get to use it. Simple as that. And then any time that your possessed dial is clicked, be it through damage, through healing, anything that would cause the dial to move, you move your possessor's dial as well, so that the click number on your possessor always matches the click number on your possessed. So there's one thing of note when you are adding the stat bonuses and the powers to the entities is that there's nothing stopping you from putting more than one entity on one possessed character. You can do it, but it may be better to put that 25 points somewhere else. And the reason for that is actually in the possessed power itself is the line. You may choose one power showing on one possessor's dial and one combat value on one possessor's dial. So it's already written into the power itself that you can do multiples, but you're only going to get one stat boost and one power from them. Now, it's not necessarily to say that this is a bad thing, because dials fluctuate, numbers fluctuate. There could be a point where this entity's dial on click 3 is good for your character, but then this entity's dial on click 5 is better for your character. Maybe you want that 8 powers to choose from, or whatever, the 8 different stats to choose from. So, I mean, like I said, you can put more than one entity on that character, but it's all about point management. If you think, hey, I've got 25 points to spare, why not throw another entity on there? It might be worth it for you, but in the end, it doesn't do anything more for you than it would if you were to put that entity on someone else, or if you were just to spend that 25 points somewhere else within your force build. So, seems simple enough. Where this gets complicated is that when you're possessing a character, they have to have certain combat symbols. You can have regular fist or sharpshooter. You can have regular defense, standard defense, or indomitable. You can have tiny size or standard damage. So anybody that is giant or colossal can't be possessed. Team bases can't be possessed. Vehicles can't be possessed. So basically anything that doesn't have a standard normal guy combat value won't be possessed. Now this possession can also be done when you are on your full dial. So if you actually have them as a character on the board, when they would normally be KO'd, instead of being KO'd, you can take them off the board and have them possess if you still have someone left on the board. Now, we were talking about combat symbols. So the reason why I have a Chameleon Girl out is that Chameleon's standard combat values are flying, fist, defense, damage. The only thing that's different on her is flying, and which makes her a candidate for being possessed. Now, when you're looking for the combat values, this is actually all done during force construction. So, combat values are something that are always on the dial. Powers aren't activated until the first turn starts, basically. Until the game is activated, till the game is starting, those powers don't exist. So, when you're looking at someone who is eligible to be possessed, they have to have one of the matching combat values actually printed on their dial, if you're going to do it through force construction. Why this is interesting or important to note is that a character like Chameleon Girl can change her combat values through a special power during the game. So you can choose her to be giant or colossal. Now if you do so and she had been possessed, then anytime that she's giant or colossal, she's still possessed. It's still something that's in the game, but she's not going to get any benefits from it. As soon as you change your combat symbols to no longer be eligible for possession, you lose your ability to be possessed. However, if you had brought in an entity as an actual character on your team on the board at the beginning of the game, when they're KO'd and they go to find someone possessed, the game's already active, which means powers are already in place, which means combat symbols can be changed, which then allows you to possess characters that normally wouldn't be able to be possessed, like Colossal Boy, who normally starts off the game as giant, but you can have him as standard size inside the game, or Trinity of Sin. They have a special power that once the game has been started, they get Sharpshooter, which allows them to be possessed inside the game. Now, the next thing I want to point out is, I was talking about force construction. The other thing that the possessor does during force construction is that it gives the possessed its keywords, which will either make or break a theme team. So, an entity like, say, Black Hand has the Black Lantern Corps, entity, and monster keyword. So you could make, if you want to have a theme team with him as a possessor, you have to have either a Black Lantern theme team, an entity theme team, or a monster theme team. Otherwise, if you go through any other themes, that's going to break your keyword. But if you decide to have an entity on absolutely everybody on your team, you have a ready-made keyword team. So, like I said, it can make or break. And for anything else in the game, special powers, what have you, that would work off of keywords, keep in mind that anybody that is possessed will have those 3 or 4 keywords that the entities are giving them, which is important for those that go up against Iron Pharaohs, who gets +1 attack and +1 damage if he's attacking someone that has a matching keyword, since Iron Pharaoh tends to be someone that people like to possess. So if a possessed Iron Pharaoh is going up against a possessed other character, he's getting that +1 attack and +1 damage. So to touch on the powers of the Possessor, these are powers that are being used. And I'm going to get into the terminology in another episode about can use versus possessed. But with these, since they're powers that the possessed can use, they can't be outwitted. So once you're taking a power from the entities, you're not going to lose that power unless, of course, you come up against the dreaded Pulse Wave, which just equalizes everything. Because if you have an entity and you're being Pulse Waved, guess what? You're being Pulse Waved. There's not too many things that get around Pulse Wave these days, unless it specifically states can't be ignored, which we'll get into in another episode. The one last thing, or a few more things I want to touch on, are possessing characters like Solomon Grundy. Now, Solomon Grundy does have a trait that he comes back to life. So, we're going to touch on how to kill the entities. Basically, like I was saying before, when you're matching click for click, the entities will weaken as your character weakens. And they are removed from the game either when the possessed has hit a KO click or the entity has hit a KO click. Do you understand why I'm talking about Solomon Grundy now? So when he gets to the end of his dial, he does have a trait that when he would be KO'd, he's going to come back onto click 9 and then heal back depending on how many resurrection tokens he has. Now, with his wording versus the wording on the entities is that the entities are based on specifically on KO'd. When this character is KO'd, when the entity hits a KO click, removed from the game. So when Solomon Grundy's trait goes off, he would be KO'd. So he's never actually KO'd. And then he's brought back onto click 9 and then healed as many tokens. So once that action resolves, he's on whatever click he's on, which means his entity is going to be on. So has he been KO'd? No. Will he land on a KO click for your entity? More than likely not. So in the case of Solomon Grundy KOing and coming back, your entity's still there. So he might be actually a prime figure, not necessarily meta, but for fun to put an entity on, because it's going to be a little bit harder to get that entity off of him. Now in that vein, when we're talking about matching the KO click, are characters like Bizarro and less often used Colleen Wing and Misty Knight. Now why I'm talking about the duo is that neither one of these dials actually have a printed KO click, which means if you're going to be going through these dials, your possessed isn't going to hit a KO click. With Bizarro, when he's spinning around, if he spins and hits, say, click 10, your possessor is now on click 10. If he gets hit to roll again and rolls past, and now he's on click 2 again, well, look, your possessor is now going to be on click 2. So in the case of Bizarro and an entity, the only way to actually get the entity off of Bizarro is if Bizarro lands on the click that the entity's actual KO click is on. In the case of Parallax, we're looking at click 12. So if after actions resolve, Bizarro's on click 12, and that shows the KO click on your entity is gone. Now I do know that with characters like Misty Knight and Colleen Wing, depending on the line point value that you have them on, their own special power has their KO clicks differently. So, I mean, once the character itself passes that line, they are KO'd, which means your possessed has been KO'd, your entity is moved. But if they're on a click that would normally not be a KO for them, like this character can actually be on click 11 or click 12, then that's when you're going to be hitting the bad clicks on your possessor. Last thing I'm going to touch on is the errata that was recently done for the entities. And that actually, funny thing about it is that it's just, the only thing they really added to the entities is that when they're removed from the game, you score points for them. The way the entity's power is actually worded, you would never have actually scored points for them, because when an item, whatever it is removed from the game, that doesn't mean you're scoring points for it. So how it was worded before was that when your possessed is KO'd, they're removed from the game. If they hit a KO click, they're removed from the game. See why this is a problem? In no way did this say that you actually scored points for it. Now, logically, everybody that has come up against these in Nationals and ROCs, the judges are going to score you the points, because otherwise, that's kind of dumb. But it had to be said because the power doesn't say it. So the errata came out this past week that when they are KO'd, when the possessor is KO'd or the possessed is KO'd, they're removed from the game and you score victory points for them. That's all I have to say about entities for today. If you guys have any questions, comments, think I missed anything, or if there's anything you would like to see me talk about in an upcoming episode, then let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys again soon. Thanks for watching.